Good morning, and welcome to today's episode of The Grind. I'm your host, Gabriel, and today we're going to be discussing the impact of electrical vehicles and the process of their construction. Joining me today is a good friend of mine, VJ.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm VJ. I'm glad to be here, glad to talk about this.
So, as I said, we're going to be discussing electric vehicles. You and I have already talked about this before off record while I was working on a project. Now that the research and project are about done, I wanted to bring you on so we can continue to discuss it. To start off, what do you remember from our previous talk?
So we did have a pretty long conversation about it, and from what I remember, I had a ton of questions about the sustainability or lack thereof sustainability of electric vehicles and just the process of creating electric vehicles, what goes into it, and what can be done to improve the evolution of electric vehicles, honestly.
Yeah, oh, not gonna lie, that's a lot more than I thought you'd remember. But for the listeners at home, we'll start at the beginning. You can ask questions as we go.
Okay.
So just to give you the overview of the project again, we're researching the impact of electric vehicles and the process of which they're made, right? Which it goes from the mining of lithium for the lithium ion batteries all the way to how much do they actually help with emissions,
Right.
right?
Right.
And I guess the best place to start off is with what everyone's familiar with, which is the electric vehicles themselves, right? You hear that a lot of electric vehicles, whenever they're marketed, it's always, oh, zero emissions, the battery is better, you can go further. But one of the big points of the project is that just because the vehicle itself has zero emissions doesn't mean that it contributes to zero emissions, because the vehicle itself has to be powered by something.
Right.
And a lot of the electrical grid is still powered by fossil fuels.
Right.
You know? So when you use the electric car, the car itself will have zero emissions, and that is better for the environment. Absolutely. However, you do have to take into account the amount of use it gets from the electrical grid.
Right.
Right?
Right.
You have to take into account charging it. You have to take into account, well, I guess if you really want the real sustainable impact, you have to take into account a lot of things, including how they make these, because the batteries for them are incredibly high tech. They use a lot of expensive, rare materials and all that. So,
Right.
it's a complicated formula to look at for sure.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's an interesting topic because there is a very big push in the U.S. for the switch to electric vehicles right now. And then one thing that I do remember is how the infrastructure and how electric vehicles are made. That is one thing that I really wanted to discuss because, like you said, I mean, in terms of individually, electric vehicles are good for the environment, but when it comes to the creation or the infrastructure or the resources required, that is something that I wanted to delve deeper into because you brought up a lot of great points last time we talked about it, and I just wanted to talk more about that.
Yeah. So when it comes to, we'll start with manufacturing, because
Okay.
when you make the vehicle, it's the same as most other cars.
Right.
The big difference comes with the engine and the battery,
Okay.
right? Because you're not using.
And what is the difference then?
So the difference is that with obviously a combustion engine, right? You need a fuel tank, and you need an engine capable of using the fuel,
Of course,
right? And
yeah.
combustion engines, obviously, they use the fossil fuels. It combusts. They set it on fire.
Right.
That the heat. That's what creates it. Right.
Right, right.
Now, when it comes to electric vehicles, what powers it is a battery. So you don't need a fuel tank. It's just the engine and the battery. Now, the problem is with these batteries, they have to be able to hold a charge for a very long time, and they have to be able to store a lot of power,
Right.
right?
Right.
Especially if they want it to have similar to, if not better performance than a gas vehicle,
Uh-huh.
right? So you would need a lot of high-end materials. And currently, what a lot of these batteries are made of is lithium is the main component. And lithium mining is generally, to put it lightly, not the best for the environment, and it does touch on a lot of exploitation,
Okay.
right?
Right.
Because we don't really do a lot of the mining of lithium here in the U.S.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but that is a question I had, is that you don't really hear a lot about lithium mining here in the U.S. And so what I wanted to ask is, how do we get those resources, and what impact does it have to build these batteries? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So getting the resources, obviously, it's from strip mining.
Okay.
But a lot of that is done elsewhere.
Okay. Right.
Lithium mines in, I'm not going to lie, I don't have the most accurate locational information, but from what I remember of my group's research, there was lithium mining going on in like the Middle East and in Africa.
Okay.
The usual locations for things like this.
Yeah, where the
right?
resources are more abundant.
Yes, the resources are more abundant and
Right.
labor is far cheaper.
Right. Of course.
You know.
Yeah.
But to kind of, we didn't really focus too much on the ethical aspect, because if we did, that would make our research a lot longer and a lot bigger of a project.
Right.
So we tried to stick strictly to the vehicles themselves.
Okay.
But the events of the lithium mining, well, a lot of it isn't handled properly.
How so?
So you from the mining, you will get a lot of runoff. Right. And sure, you can say like, hey, these areas don't really have like a lot of, don't really have a lot of rain, blah blah blah, whatever. But here's the thing: you're still stripping the earth of resources, right? And at some point, we will run out.
Right.
And I believe last time I brought up the General Electric ad with Will Ferrell and talking about Norway and how they wanted to release 30 new electric vehicles by 2025.
Yes, how they wanted to compete with Norway.
Yeah, and I brought up a lot of problems with that, because Norway is a far smaller country than the U.S. The size of Norway is at most the size of 2 United States states.
Right, yeah.
Right? So for 2 states, that sounds incredibly feasible, incredibly doable, and absolutely something that should be, that we should strive for.
Right.
But if you were to apply that on a much larger scale, quite literally 25 times the scale,
Yeah.
it becomes a lot harder.
The impact is a lot more
Yeah.
greater than in Norway.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Because 2 states here in the U.S. of doing that
Right.
is a lot. It would not contribute too much, right? Whereas if we did the entire country, but Norway doesn't have that problem.
Right.
They don't have that problem of having to cover all that massive Midwest space.
Right, of course. Yeah.
And speaking of massive space, you can't really do the long road trips with these electric vehicles because you can't charge them quickly enough.
How long does it usually take to charge an electric vehicle?
If you're lucky, an hour. But I've heard it can be anywhere from 1 to 6 hours for a full charge.
Okay.
And I don't know about you, but waiting 3 hours or even 1 hour,
Right. That's
to
a
fuel
long
up?
time.
No, I could never do that. I could never do that.
Especially on a long road trip. That would be a lot of your road trip.
That adds almost half a day.
Yeah.
Just to your travel time.
Right.
You'd be better off renting a gas vehicle at that point.
Right. And environmentally, what is the impact of using these electric vehicles on, say, long road trips?
So, on long road trips, again, they genuinely don't have emissions themselves.
Yeah.
Right. But to offset the emissions of a gas vehicle, you would need to drive your electric car for about 450,000 miles. And I got this information from a TED Talk by a guy named Graham Conway.
Okay.
And he's someone who has been, for the past decade or so, probably more at this point, been in the field of electric vehicles and automobiles and has been doing research with it. So that is a man that I trust to know what he's talking about.
Right, he knows what he's talking about, yeah.
And if he says 450,000 miles to offset the emissions of a gas vehicle, no one keeps a car for even 300,000.
No, I mean, you're lucky to get 200,000 on a
200,000 is pushing
Yeah,
it.
exactly.
You are praying to God at that point.
Right.
But, it takes a lot to really offset the emissions of a gas vehicle.
Okay.
In my personal opinion, what the U.S. is trying to do by pushing electric vehicles isn't the wrong move, per se. It's just not the right move for now.
Okay.
Right? Because usually when you have these jumps of technological innovation, usually you'll see a nice little transitional period.
Right.
right?
Right.
Like I don't like you know how we have hybrid cars,
Yes.
right? Half
Yes.
electric and then half gas.
Half gas.
Yeah. So my mother has a hybrid car,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now me, I only have a gas car. It's fuel efficient,
Right.
but it's still just gas.
Right.
And I can get about 330 miles on a single tank, on a full tank, and that's with the windy, hilly roads that we drive on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
My mother, she drives out to DC sometimes, and that will get me that'll get her up to 400 to 600 depending on what she's driving.
Right.
Right. Like the kind of road, that kind of thing. On a high, like we could easily drive down to Virginia Beach and back in one tank if we really pushed it.
Yeah.
Right. But it's genuinely just incredible that you can get that with a hybrid.
But
And
with an electric,
you're looking at equal to or less
less.
mileage than you
Okay.
would with a gas car, in
Okay.
in my opinion, right? Because I'm also trying to take into account the fact that you have to wait so long to fully charge it.
Right.
Whereas with a gas vehicle, you're there for a few minutes and then you're done.
Yeah. And actually, one thing that I did want to bring up that we did talk about last time is the lack of charging stations that there are here in the United States.
Yeah, that's another big issue with electric vehicles. Mm-hmm. So I actually found this out after we had our conversation. I found a news article from 2023 from last year.
Okay,
Is that
so
the
that pretty
yeah,
recent.
it was really recent,
Right.
right? Where apparently there was whole ass legislation, like lawmakers had approved it was either a 500 million or 5 billion, something like that. It was a big amount of money.
Yeah.
Right, budget
Uh-huh.
to create a network of fast charging stations across the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
Want to know how many states have done that since then?
How many?
2.
Two. What? Do you know what states have
Oh
done that?
yeah, you'll never get. You might guess what one of them is, but you won't guess the other one.
Virginia's not one of them.
Oh God, no.
Okay. California,
No.
New York.
Yes.
New York is one of them, and
York
there's
is one of
one
them.
more.
You're not gonna guess it.
I don't
Ohio.
know. Ohio, really?
Yeah. It's New York and Ohio are the only ones that have actually done anything with that money. All other 48 states, nada.
Wow.
Heck, if you want to keep it to the mainland states, that's still only 2 out of 40. That's only 2 out of 48.
Right.
That's still 46 states that have not done anything with that money.
Right.
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 So it's the infrastructure to maintain the electric vehicles is almost non-existent.
Okay.
You know, especially if they're pushing for everyone to have an electric car. Mm-hmm. Unless you have charging stations as abundant and as fast as gas stations, I don't see it happening.
Okay.
I don't see it being practical. We'll say.
Right. Right. So then I guess one of my questions is, what can we do to increase the practicality or to increase the sustainability or to increase the to better the infrastructure of the charging stations with electric vehicles? Because you said, I mean, individually each car, is good for the environment, but the infrastructure is not there yet. So what can we do as a nation, or is there anything that can be done?
So obviously, doing something with that money that was allotted for the fast charging stations.
Yeah,
firstly,
I mean, that's a lot of money.
First and foremost, right? But secondly, it's not just the charging stations themselves, right?
Okay.
Because fast charging can be done. That can be fixed, right?
Right.
You just got to pump more wattage, more voltage. I don't really know the electrical engineering behind it, right? But I'm sure you can do something about it.
Yeah.
The problem is the batteries themselves,
Uh-huh.
as well as the cost that much power usage, added power usage will have on the power grid. Because like I said earlier, our power grids are still mostly powered by fossil fuels.
Right.
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 And the only reason that their environmental impact is what they are is because of how much energy is being used. If
Okay.
everyone switches to electric cars, that's more
That's more power
fossil.
required.
Yeah, that's more power required. That's more fossil fuel burned at the power plants. Mm-hmm. Right. Now we weren't able to find any numbers on exactly how much an electric vehicle would increase that,
Okay.
but I can imagine that one electric vehicle would not change much.
Right.
But if
if
you change that
everyone
to
were
thousands
switch,
and
yeah,
hundreds of thousands
Right.
and maybe even millions, that's going to have a
the
massive
amount of
effect.
power
Yeah.
that would require is a lot more than You know,
Especially if they want to make it fast charging stations.
right? Yeah, because fast charging stations. I mean, I don't know much about the whole thing, but I assume they require a lot more power. I mean, how long does it usually take for these fast charging stations to charge an electric vehicle? Do you know?
Oh, I'm pretty sure that's the hour.
Oh, so that's the one.
That's the 1 hour.
That's the 1 hour one.
Yeah, the 1 to 2 hours. I'm pretty sure because
Okay.
I don't, and like I said, like you'd be lucky to be driving through the Midwest,
Right.
right, and say you're on a long stretch of just empty plains and road. You'd be real lucky to find an electric charger out there.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course.
Not every gas station has one.
Right.
Even out here in like suburban Virginia, Northern Virginia, there's like not a lot. It's not at every gas station. It's at a
No,
lot of
it's
them,
not.
but not at every.
No, it's not. I mean, I have a friend that has an electric vehicle, and they've been to some gas. Like, they'll be running out of battery, and then they'll go to a gas station. Turns out they don't have a charger there. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? So then they have to move on. They got to find a different
yeah.
place. Yeah. Right. So I guess another one of my questions then is like, I don't know. I guess it's just because in terms of sustainability, you always hear about, oh, the Switch it's going to help the environment. But, I mean, so really what you're saying is that with all the power that's required, the environmental impact, would it be worse then?
So, according to the research that we had done, it's not so much that the environmental impact is worse,
Okay.
as much as it is that it's just not worth it,
Okay.
right?
Right.
Because ideally, if everyone did switch to electric vehicles and we had the infrastructure, absolutely, emissions would probably go down,
Right.
right?
Right.
But the thing is, not everyone would switch to electric vehicles.
Of course.
Even if we did have the infrastructure, not everyone would switch, right? And even with trying to roll it out so that it can be accessible to everyone, not everyone can afford it.
Yes. Yes. They
know?
are pretty expensive, honestly.
And and in terms of overall environmental sustainability, one of the biggest things that will impact it is how good those batteries are. Because you won't have to recharge as much if you have a better battery,
Right.
right? It's the same thing as having more efficient fuel or a bigger fuel tank,
Yes. Yeah.
right? The bigger the battery, the better the battery, the more you can drive for,
Right.
right? And they're working on something called a solid state battery.
Okay. And what is
Right.
that?
So the solid state battery, admittedly, I'm not really all that sure. All I know is that it's apparently better than what we have because I'm pretty sure what we use are liquid batteries, which is where like the battery acid comes from,
Okay.
right? You know, like that crusty stuff on old batteries.
Oh.
That's
That's
that leaking out,
Okay.
right? So I'm pretty sure like the solid state battery is similar to solid state fuel,
Okay.
where it's like a denser, more compact version of the fuel, but it's also more efficient because it burns better. But I guess in this case, it just holds power and is more powerful, I think.
So
But
there's
again,
like
I'm
less
not-
runoff type
yeah,
thing.
there's less. It's more efficient.
Okay. Okay.
Is my assumption. Like I said, I'm not too good with the engineering side of this.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Unfortunately, that is not my forte. I tried that, did not work.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
it's really interesting to see that the government is pushing this really hard, despite the country, the people not being ready for it.
Right. No, and one thing that I did want to bring up is the going back to the Will Ferrell commercial is the General Motors wanting to push. What is it you said? 30 new
30
models.
new models, and
And
that,
how soon do they want to push that out?
by 2025. And that commercial was released, I think, in 2020, 2021, something like that.
So not that long ago.
Not that long ago. That is 6 new models a year.
That is a ridiculous amount. I mean, for 5-6 years, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's insane. Like how many changes are those cars going through?
Right. Right.
You know?
Right.
And sure, you can be like, oh, it's more battery efficient each time, but like, if the changes are incremental, is there really a difference?
Yeah. For
You
sure.
know, like it's like when I went from an iPhone 6 to an iPhone 11. That's a drastic change.
That's a big
That's
difference.
worth it.
Yeah, the software, the tech, everything.
Now,
is
if I were to
different
go from like an 11 to a 12, that's not a lot of difference. Or like a 10 to the 11,
Right.
not a lot of difference.
there. Right.
You know.
Uh huh.
So, and like I said, and you know, with the government pushing for this, there's always the talk of, oh, the vehicles are sustainable. We brought this up this entire conversation.
Right.
Everyone always says, oh, zero emissions, oh, sustainable, or whatever they want to call it. But no one ever talks about what the actual sustainability of the vehicles are.
So what is the actual sustainability of the vehicles compared to what the government would want you or is trying to tell us?
So the government is trying to tell you that it is sustainable. It is worth it. This
Yes.
is helping the environment.
Right. I mean,
That's
just
what-
look
that-
at the Tesla commercials that are coming out.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Right. And you know, like that's what all the companies and the government they all want you to think this is absolutely one of the best ways for you to help the environment.
Mm-hmm.
Realistically, again, according to the research we found and combined with my own personal opinion, it's not worth it.
Okay.
Right? There will be a good impact from the vehicle itself.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not a big enough impact that it'll make it worth it. Unless you're willing to drive that EV for 450,000 miles, in which case, good on you. But
there's no way that
you know what?
car is lasting
That's
that
some
long.
commitment right there.
Right. There's no way that car is
There's
lasting
no
that
way it's
long.
lasting that long.
Yeah, I mean, like
You
I
know.
said, you're lucky to get 200,000 on
Yeah.
a really good, you know what I'm saying,
On
gas
a really
car.
good
Yeah.
current model.
Right.
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 And I don't know. It's difficult because there's no good solutions to this.
Okay.
Because there aren't really any acceptable, well, not so much acceptable as much as there aren't any practical alternatives, right? You could say that, oh, just put solar panels on the roof of the car.
Mm-hmm.
You can passively charge itself while in the sun. Like, cool. What if you put your car in the garage,
Right.
right? And here's the thing: the highest level of efficiency a solar panel has right now. This is including publicly known military grade.
Okay.
This is including publicly known military grade, and
So
I'm
that's like
specifying
highest
publicly.
tech, yeah.
Highest tech
Yeah.
that is publicly known
Right.
is like 49%.
Really?
That's only half.
So that's like highest grade, highest possibility. We get half of the
energy that it absorbs.
Really, and then what happens to the other half? Do you know?
You can't use it.
Really? Okay.
Yeah,
Huh.
and then the highest civilian grade that you can put on like solar panels for homes and stuff is 22.8.
22%.
22.8%.
So really, most of the energy is being lost.
Yes.
Like a good 4/5, like 80%
Yeah,
of the
a
energy.
good
is
almost
being-
80%. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, like, I'm not saying don't get solar panels. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm just saying that like the efficiency of solar panels that we have available to us is not at a level where it would be a good alternative for fossil fuel when charging these cars.
Right. And going back to the cost of it, I mean, just an installation of solar panels in itself, that's pricey.
Oh
You
yeah,
know what I mean?
It's like it costs upwards of 20,000.
Yeah. Yeah.
22, 24,000, especially for the really high end ones. Like I said, the 22.8%.
Right. So you're still losing a lot of energy.
You're still losing a lot of energy,
And it's very pricey.
and it's very pricey.
Okay.
Right. And there's no real clean alternative solutions. You can say wind turbines. Sure, but there's problems with those as well. There's problems with solar panels. There's problems with geothermal energy. There's problems everywhere with every kind of energy, even nuclear.
Of course.
Right,
Yeah.
obviously. So, right, we don't have the technology right now to make clean, 100% clean energy.
Right.
The best we can do is find alternatives and make use of what we have to substitute what we can't, to substitute what we can change, and then hopefully make more efficient what we can't.
So what I'm getting really is that the technology we have isn't up to par to sustain, I mean, environmentally, resource-wise, money-wise. It's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable right now. No, not. It's just not practical for a country as large as the U.S.
Right. Okay. So, would it be better then to switch to something like a hybrid vehicle, like something that your mom has, where it can use gas, but there is the option of electric?
In my opinion, I think hybrid vehicles are really cool and do in fact should need to be used more. My team and I, we did come up with like alternatives to using private electric vehicles, like public transportation, making that electric,
Right.
like an electric bus, because you can then schedule out the charging. You have control over that. You
Right.
can schedule out the charging. You
Right.
won't need to worry about the charging stations.
Right.
And then you can save people a lot of gas, or hell, even a lot of electricity, because you have the public
Yeah.
transport.
Yeah, because it's being charged publicly through, the
Yeah.
power grid and everything like that.
Yeah.
But even then, I mean, I can see a problem where it's like something like that is only really helpful in, say, like an urban area like New
Yeah.
York. You know what I mean? I mean, you won't go to Centerville and then, yeah, you know what I mean?
Ah, yes,
We're
the
not-
public transportation bus in Centerville.
Yeah, exactly.
That's definitely there all of the time.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're not going to find an electric bus here anytime soon.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So, for the most part, really, a lot of it's just not practical.
Uh-huh.
We don't have the technology, we don't have the infrastructure, we're missing so much that it's just not worth it.
Okay.
But again, that's mostly based off of what we had found in our research and my own personal opinion.
Okay. So then I do have to ask this then. I mean, because of all these things that you've mentioned, is there any real benefit to switching to an electric at this day and age, at this point in time?
That's a tough question, genuinely. On a personal level, if you think it's worth it, go for it. My stance really is that nationwide, it is not sustainable.
Okay.
But personally, that's a different story.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have the money, if you have the resources, then
Go for it.
go for it. But implementing it throughout the whole U.S.
That's a massive other problem. Yeah.
Okay. And technologically wise, how much longer do you think it would take to get there?
Oh, I have no clue. One of my teammates said maybe probably at least another 10 years.
Really? So not anytime soon?
Not anytime soon.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, and that looks like it's about time for what we've got today. Thank you so much for coming on and helping me out with this, homie.
No, honestly, it was a very interesting topic. I mean, yeah, because you see such a push nowadays for electric vehicles. So it's a very interesting topic that I would love to know more about.
Yeah.
So appreciate you for having me out, and thank you for informing me.
Yeah, of course, man. So, this is VJ and Gabriel, and, well, good luck on your daily grind, everyone. Have a good one.
Take it easy.